everyone, and welcome to World News Program with me, Madam Zian, to the headlines. Israeli airstrike kills 19 Palestinians in Gaza. An UNRWA clinic and civil defense reports targeted executions in Algeria, calls for an emergency UN Security Council meeting amid escalation. Next, US airstrikes kill 61 in Yemen since mid-March, and Houthis target US warships in Red Sea, including USS Truman. Also coming up, Russian envoy may visit US amid talks. Zelensky reports energy strikes and Kremlin reaffirms ceasefire commitment. And Trump announces Liberation Day tariffs on major economies. EU vows response, and Lagarde calls for economic self-sufficiency. Hello and welcome to the details of your program. First in our news, 19 Palestinians were killed and others were injured on Wednesday evening in an initial toll following a Zionist airstrike that targeted an UNRWA clinic in the middle of Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza.
What are these crimes of the occupation? What are these crimes? Show it to the entire world. Show it to all humanity in the world, in the east and west of the earth. This is a 1-week-old baby girl.
The displaced people, most of them come from the border areas, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia. We're sitting here peacefully. There's nothing wrong about them. They are ordinary people, women, children, sitting here peacefully. Some were sleeping, some were cooking on the fire, and others playing with their kids. They were bombed. Are these the Jews' goals? Are these the Jews' goals?
The government media office in Gaza has condemned the massacre committed by the occupation against displaced people at the UNRWA clinic and the Jabalia refugee camp. The office also pointed out that the number of displaced centers targeted by the Zionist occupation has reached 228 centers, in a blatant violation of all international conventions that ensure the protection of civilians during conflicts, stressing that the targeting of a medical clinic belonging to a UN organization constitutes a complete war crime that requires urgent international accountability.
We strongly condemn in the strongest terms the ongoing Israeli occupation's crime of genocide against civilians and displaced people. We condemn this barbaric aggression which deliberately targets medical facilities and humanitarian shelters. The number of displacement centers targeted by the Israeli occupation has reached 228 centers, in a blatant violation of all international conventions that ensure the protection of civilians during conflicts. The targeting of a medical clinic belonging to a UN organization constitutes a complete war crime that requires urgent international accountability.
And 15 Palestinians were killed and others were injured in a Zionist airstrike targeting the center of Khan Yunis, south of the Gaza Strip. 8 other Palestinians, including 3 children, were also killed in a Zionist airstrike on the Salam neighborhood in Khan Yunis. Local sources said that the bodies of the martyrs were transferred to the morgue of the hospital in the same area. At least 70 Palestinians were killed and others injured in Israeli airstrikes on various areas of Gaza since dawn on Wednesday. According to Palestinian sources, Zionist warplanes carried out a series of airstrikes targeting different parts of the Strip, resulting in the deaths of at least 70 Palestinians and the injury of others. Gaza's civil defense announced that Israeli forces cold-bloodedly executed members of its teams and paramedics from the Palestinian Red Crescent. Mahmoud Bassal, spokesperson for Gaza's civil defense, stated on Wednesday that Israel committed a war crime by targeting Palestinian Red Crescent crews. He added that Israeli forces are escalating acts of genocide by deliberately attacking humanitarian teams.
قامت قوات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي
The Israeli occupation forces killed civil defense and Red Crescent staffs, whose number was set at 15 people, including one of the UNRWA who was present next to our staff who were killed. The scene was tough and painful. We saw our staff with their hands and feet cuffed. We saw our staff stripped off their clothes. We saw numerous bullets in the chest, in addition to a big mass grave in which they put bodies in black bags. This is a proof that the Israeli occupation committed this massacre in a clear and deliberate manner by killing the staff after taking them out of their vehicles and completely destroying the entire region.
Algeria's call on the Security Council or called for an emergency UN Security Council meeting on Wednesday to address the situation in Palestine. According to sources, Algeria's request comes amid the severe escalation in the occupied Palestinian territories, particularly in Gaza, following a horrific massacre committed by Israeli forces against emergency workers and relief personnel from the Palestinian Red Crescent, Palestinian Civil Defense, and the United Nations. These sources added that the meeting is also being convened in response to the unprecedented surge in settler violence in the West Bank. The session is expected to take place on Thursday afternoon. Algeria has warned against the continued policy of impunity enjoyed by Israeli occupation forces in occupied Palestinian territories. Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar bin Jama, stated during a UN Security Council session dedicated to discussing mechanisms for protecting civilians in armed conflict or in armed conflict zones that the ongoing violations against aid workers and Palestinian civilians in Gaza represents a failure of the international community, which is not fulfilling its obligations. He called for establishing a strong mechanism to ensure respect for international humanitarian law.
Algeria was clear: without a robust mechanism to ensure respect for international humanitarian law and end impunity, all efforts will be in vain. Continuing violation of international humanitarian law, as we witness in Gaza today, represent our collective failure. The international community is not fulfilling its obligations.
Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar bin Jama, called for independent investigations and accountability for the occupation's crimes against Palestinian civilians.
This tragic reality compels us to question the relevance of Resolution 2730, the relevance of international humanitarian law, and even the relevance of the Security Council itself.
Bakeries in Gaza are closing as famine looms, with the Israeli occupation intensifying its aggression and its assault on Palestinians. Forced displacement, killings, and starvation continue as the ground invasion in Rafah escalates, leaving over 2 million Palestinians suffering. Hosam Barkan has more details.
Killing, torture, starvation, and forced displacement. Attacks and arrests are among the Zionist methods used by the occupation against Gaza residents, aiming to transfer the settlement project from the West Bank to the Strip. A large-scale ground operation is underway in the Al Janina area of Rafah, intensifying control over the steadfast Palestinian people who have endured the occupation's horrific crimes for over 18 months.
Gaza has been completely devastated, declared a disaster zone, under the banner of Israel's operations to escalate its ground invasion and pressure the Palestinian people. We have spent 18 months under the scorching sun and bitter cold, living under the open sky with no shelter. We are all brothers sitting in agony while missiles rain down on us constantly without distinction between civilians and soldiers. Their goal is to wipe out the Palestinian people entirely.
Evacuation orders and Zionist decisions force Palestinians to leave their homes. The direct targeting of civilians on displacement routes is just another Zionist tactic to seize more land and tighten the siege on more than 2 million Palestinians in Gaza.
It seems Netanyahu is determined to continue his war on Gaza to force us to migrate. But despite the genocide, the suffering and the repeated displacements, 8 times now, I swear we will remain patient and steadfast on our land. Internal displacement means we are still inside our homeland. We can still see our relatives, but external displacement, no. We will never accept it. We will remain on this land.
The Zionist arsenal, it has destroyed all means of life in the Strip. Yet, it has failed to erase the spirit of resistance, resilience, and attachment to the land, despite the horrors of its crimes.
From the first day of the war until today, we have had no electricity. The army says they won't restore electricity and they will cut it off completely. But we have already been without it for 18 months. What will happen if they never bring it back? We barely survive, living on whatever little fuel we can find, using candles for light. Life under this ground invasion is unbearable.
In Rafah, the occupation continues to complete the pillars of genocide against the Palestinian people. The worlds remain complicit, standing idly by in the face of the occupation brutality, and when it does not equate the victim with the executioner, at best, it merely issues statement of condemnation.
And Ben Gvir led Israeli settlers in storming Al-Aqsa Mosque on Wednesday under heavy protection from Israeli occupation forces. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, dozens of settlers led by Ben Gvir entered Al-Aqsa Mosque in successive groups through the Moroccan gate and performed Talmudic rituals in its courtyards. The agency added that Israeli forces intensify their presence at the mosque's gates and around the Old City, restricting the entry of worshippers. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas stated that the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque courtyards by the extremist minister Ben Gvir this morning is a provocation and a dangerous escalation. In a statement on Thursday, Hamas added that this escalation is part of the ongoing genocide against the Palestinian people and the Zionist government's efforts led by war criminal Netanyahu to Judaize Al-Aqsa Mosque and impose a new reality in the Holy City.
The storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque courtyards this morning by the fascist minister Ben Gvir is a provocation and a dangerous escalation, coming as part of the ongoing genocide against our Palestinian people and the efforts of the terrorist government, led by the war criminal Netanyahu, to Judaize Al-Aqsa Mosque and impose a new reality in the Holy City. We call upon our Palestinian people and our revolutionary youth in the West Bank to escalate confrontation with this arrogant enemy in all areas, in defense of our land and holy sites, foremost among them Al-Aqsa Mosque.
And U.S. airstrikes on northern and northwestern Yemeni provinces have killed at least 61 people since March 15, according to media outlets affiliated with the Ansarullah al-Houthi movement. On Tuesday, the group's health ministry reported that 3 employees of the water authority were killed and 2 others injured in strikes targeting the authorities' building in Al-Mansouriya district of Al-Hudaydah province.
In response to the U.S. aggression against our country, the naval forces, the missile forces, and drones in our armed forces attacked hostile military vessels in the Red Sea, led by the U.S. aircraft carrier Truman, with a number of cruise missiles and drones in a fierce exchange of fire. This is the 3rd attack in the last 24 hours. The armed forces' operations continue against the U.S. enemy, targeting its military aircraft in the aforementioned battlefield with an increasing frequency, God willing.
Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sari announced on Wednesday that cruise missiles and drones targeted warships in the Red Sea, including the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Truman. Seria stated that the attack was carried out in retaliation for the killing of 7 civilians in U.S. airstrikes on Al-Hudaydah. He warned against provocations of American naval vessels in the region that would continue at an accelerated pace.
The operations of the armed forces against the Israeli enemy by preventing its navigation in the Red and Arabian Seas and by targeting its military and vital facilities aim to stop the genocide against the oppressed Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip.
The United Nations welcomed the announcement of a new expanded government in Syria, emphasizing the importance of a comprehensive political transition that fulfills the aspiration of the Syrian people. UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric stressed the need for an inclusive political transition that enables Syrians to reclaim their sovereignty, overcome the ongoing conflict, and achieve their legitimate aspirations while contributing to regional stability. And Reuters, citing a source, reported that a Russian official is expected to visit Washington this week for talks with the U.S. administration. The source added that the head of Russia's sovereign wealth fund, Kirill Dmitriev, is set to meet with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. A CNN report earlier indicated that the two officials would meet to discuss strengthening relations between the two countries as they seek to end the war in Ukraine. And the Kremlin announced that Russian negotiator Kirill Dmitriev may visit the U.S. this week, while American media reported that he is expected to arrive in Washington to meet with Steve Witkoff, the envoy of U.S. President Donald Trump. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Russia continues its communications with the Americans at various levels and on different issues, noting that there are no specific details yet regarding the potential meeting between Putin and Trump.
Yes, and this has been confirmed. A similar visit may be possible as we continue our talks with the Americans.
The Russian Defense Ministry accused Ukraine on Wednesday of attacking Russia's energy infrastructure twice in the past 24 hours. In a statement, the ministry said that Ukraine carried out drone strikes and artillery shelling on facilities in Russia's Kursk region, causing power outages. Moscow and Kiev continue to trade accusations over attacks on energy infrastructure, despite a U.S. brokered agreement stipulating that neither side would target such facilities. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Wednesday that Russian attacks had damaged energy facilities in the Ukrainian regions of Sumy and Dnipropetrovsk. In a post on X, Zelensky stated that drones struck a power substation in Sumy, northeastern Ukraine, while artillery fire hit a power line in Dnipropetrovsk, central Ukraine, cutting off service to nearly 4,000 customers. In the same context, Russia reaffirmed its commitment to halting attacks on energy infrastructure in both Russia and Ukraine, claiming that Kiev had never formally joined the voluntary suspension. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov emphasized that President Vladimir Putin remains open to peace talks and negotiated settlement to end the conflict in Ukraine. He added that Russia's decision to stop targeting energy facilities demonstrates Moscow's clear desire for peace. President Donald Trump unveiled a comprehensive plan for tariffs during a ceremony in the White House Rose Garden, which he dubbed Liberation Day. The plan imposes steep tariffs or tariff rates on many countries, including 34% on China, 20% on the EU, and 46% on Vietnam. Donald Trump also called on foreign companies to build their products in the U.S. to avoid tariffs.
67%, that's tariff, but it's not too late any longer, and we're going to start being smart, and we're going to start being very wealthy again. We're going to be wealthy as a country because they've taken so much of our wealth away from us. We're not going to let that happen. we truly can be very wealthy. We can be so much wealthier than any country. It's not even believable, but we're getting smart. Nearly a century later, in the face of unrelenting economic warfare, the United States can no longer continue with a policy of unilateral economic surrender. We cannot pay the deficits of Canada, Mexico, and so many other countries. We used to do it. We can't do it anymore.
And prior to President Trump's announcement, a spokesperson for the EU stated on Wednesday that the bloc's response to US President Donald Trump's plan to impose new counter-tariffs will come at the appropriate time. For her part, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde confirmed that the anticipated tariffs represent a turning point in Europe's journey toward achieving economic independence, stressing the need to enhance self-sufficiency in defense and energy supplies.
On our response, all I can say is that there will be one. It will happen at the appropriate moment after the expected announcement later this evening. And concerning your question whether we've done maths on the potential impact on the European economy of such measures, the answer is yes, of course. I'm not going to present any of that analysis here now. There'll be a time for doing that in the coming days and weeks.
And in the same context, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed on Wednesday that a trade war with the US is not in anyone's interest. During the weekly Prime Minister's question session in Parliament, Starmer emphasized that the United Kingdom is working on maintaining a calm and balanced relationship with the US, and that constructive dialogue with the US is ongoing and progressing. He also pointed out that there are plans in place to address the new US trade decisions.
Let me be clear with the House. A trade war is in nobody's interests. And the country deserves, and we will take, a calm, pragmatic approach. That's why constructive talks are progressing to agree a wider economic prosperity deal with the US. That's why we're working with all industries and sectors likely to be impacted.
Similarly, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni stated that the imposition of new US tariffs will severely impact Italian producers. Speaking at the Italian Cuisine Awards ceremony in Rome, Meloni emphasized that she's convinced of the necessity to work hard to avoid a trade war at all costs, noting that she does not rule out taking appropriate measures in response to the US tariffs in order to defend Italian products.
Quello statunitense chiaramente per noi è un mercato fondamentale.
The US is clearly a key market for us. It is clear that the introduction of new tariffs would have heavy repercussions for Italian producers. I personally think it would also be an injustice for many US citizens because it would limit the possibility of buying and consuming our excellence, except for those who can afford to spend more.
And in turn, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said that Canada would respond with retaliatory measures if Washington imposes additional tariffs against it. Let's take a listen.
President Trump is in the process of trying to fundamentally restructure the U.S. economy, and that means that our economy here needs to change dramatically as well. And as I made clear to President Trump in our call last week, I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada, all attempts to wear us down, to break us down, so that America can own us.
And the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced that his country will continue developing its peaceful nuclear program in accordance with international standards. In a phone call with his Dutch counterpart, Caspar Veldkamp, on Wednesday, Araghchi stated that Iran is open to indirect negotiations with the US without threats. He also criticized the European Union's silence regarding what he described a provocative rhetoric from American officials. Araghchi emphasized that, as in the past, Iran is ready for genuine negotiations on an equal footing and in an indirect format, rejecting any threatening statements against Tehran as unacceptable. And the UN Security Council is set to hold a closed-door consultation session on April 14 to discuss the latest developments in the occupied Western Sahara. The session is expected to feature statements from Alexander Ivanko, The special representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the UN mission for the referendum in Western Sahara, as well as from Staffan de Mistura, the UN Secretary General's personal envoy to Western Sahara. And to sports news, on Wednesday evening, CS Constantine and USM Alger played to a 2-1 draw in their CAF Confederation Cup quarterfinal first leg match. The game was held at the Martyr Hamlawi Stadium in Constantine, and CS Constantine's midfielder Munder Tamin opened the scoring in the 29th minute. However, their advantage was short-lived as USM Alger equalized in the 74th minute with Congolese defender Kevin Mondeko finding the back of the net. The return leg will take place next Wednesday at the 5 July Stadium in the Algerian capital, Algiers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. That's a wrap for tonight's program. Have a great night.